the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. One of the most difficult types of political races for voters and reporters, I might add, are judicial contests. Judges have to be very careful during campaigns not to take stands that predetermine how they will rule in a particular case. As a result, it is almost impossible to have a sitting judge and their opponent come together in an environment like this. This year, Hamilton County, we have a contest between two non-incumbents running against each other for a seat on juvenile court. Treating juveniles differently than adults in the judicial system developed first in Illinois in 1899 and spread across the nation over the next 25 years. In Hamilton County, the juvenile court was established in 1907 under Judge Charles Hoffman. Ben Lindsay, a juvenile judge in Denver, Colorado, developed the more informal, intimate style that characterizes most juvenile courtrooms. The goal is not just to determine if a young person committed a particular crime, but what can be done to steer that person away from additional crimes in the future. I am joined this morning by the candidates for Hamilton County Juvenile Judge. Tracie Hunter is an attorney with 17 years of experience. Her clients have included adults and children, and she has served as a guardian ad litem for abused and rejected children. She is also the pastor of Western Hills Brethren in Christ Church and broadcast on WCVG, an urban gospel radio station. Ms. Hunter won the Democratic nomination in May by swamping Daniel Donnellan. John Williams, the Republican candidate, began his career in the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office. He was first assigned to the Juvenile Court Division and over 10 years moved to other courts and ultimately chief of the grand jury. In 2004, Mr. Williams became director of the Hamilton County Board of Elections, where he oversaw 19 elections. He currently works as the administrator of the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts under Patricia Clancy. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you for having us.
I mentioned that juvenile court's a little bit different than other courts. Tracie, let's begin with you. What is it that you see as the role of juvenile court, and what is it that you think you would bring to that?
Well, Dan, thank you. Great question. The juvenile court system was established with an idea of rehabilitation over incarceration. Unfortunately, many juvenile systems, as well as ours here in Hamilton County, have somewhat moved away from that concept. And we have more of an incarceration standpoint. And we need to get back to rehabilitation, because the idea is that if we transform young people and change their mindsets and to eliminate the destructive behavior that causes them to engage in a life of criminality, then we can put them back on the right path and cause them to be more productive citizens. And that is what I bring to the table. I am focusing on rehabilitation, education, application, and restoration. I believe that we eliminate the destructive components that are leading to a life of crime, that we educate them, because overwhelmingly the statistics show that there's a direct correlation between young people that are incarcerated and academic failure in their lives. We make sure that we are taking away their excuses. I believe you train up a child in the way they should go.
Okay, let's, John, you have been the prosecutor.
That's correct.
In juvenile court. Right. Do you see it any differently than the way Tracie set this up in terms of the way the court intends to operate, and do you see that in Hamilton County there has been a tendency to move towards incarcerating more and more young people?
Actually, I would certainly disagree with that statement. As a prosecutor, I've had 10 years experience in that office. I tried literally hundreds of cases in the prosecutor's office, all through the juvenile division, municipal division, common pleas division. I've seen the very toughest our society has to offer. But the juvenile court exists because it is by nature a rehabilitative court. Only the worst of the worst end up in a situation where they would be bound over or incarcerated. The statistics in Hamilton County, as well as most other courts, juvenile courts will demonstrate and show that the vast majority of the people that come down there are subject to rehabilitation. Only a very, very small group of people end up getting transferred, or jurisdiction being transferred to the adult system. And so we would not have a juvenile court unless there was a difference between kids and adults. We do need to intervene early because in our society right now, if we start and spend the money early to get these young people back on the right track, we're going to be in a lot better shape down the road.
Well, let me ask this question. We'll begin, John, with you. What exists today for rehabilitation and intervention for young people? What tools does the court have today to do good rehabilitation? And would you like to see, if you were elected to the bench on juvenile court, would you like to see things added? So let's begin, John, with you about what the tools are judges have to work with.
Well, we have certainly probation department that will intervene and try to get the young person in some level of supervision. One of the reasons the kids are coming to the court is they lack supervision. And so kids that lack supervision don't go to school. You become truant, you fall behind in school. The overriding thing that we see is not, the children are not grade appropriate. Okay, so the juvenile court has an excellent facility in Hillcrest School. The Hillcrest program is a really wonderful program, and it has components there to take young people who have gone astray and to educate them, to try to get them up to grade level. And we also have a sex offender treatment program out there and many other rehabilitative measures in the court.
I want to be clear. Hillcrest is a place that probably a first-time offender isn't going to, I mean, it isn't just for everybody. It's not just a juvenile jail, is it? I mean, there's a lot of other tools that are used before Hillcrest?
Yes, there are. There are probationary tools. Okay. We have all sort of interventions that we use with programs that we're going to place these young people in. And so I think that when we look at all the statistics, all the bind-over statistics, all that, we see that if 180 children, let's say, are subject to the bind-over in Hamilton County, I think less than half of those children were bound over. So most of these kids
bound over to adult court.
To adult court.
Okay.
To adult court.
Tracie, what's your view about the tools that are available to juvenile court today? How would you evaluate them? Whether it's Hillcrest, it's the probation system, it's whatever. How would you evaluate, and would you like to see anything different?
Well, there must be something different because despite what my opponent here says, we have a recidivism rate here in Hamilton County of about 70%. That's a repeat offender rate.
About 70%. Okay.
That means that the majority of persons that enter into the system as offenders are 70% more likely to return as repeat offenders. So clearly something is not working. We have a great program in place, again, with our juvenile center as well as with our Hillcrest training program. But when you have a recidivism rate that exceeds the recidivism rate of most other urban counties here in the state of Ohio, there's a problem and we must address it. So we must look at what's not working so that we can fix it, because the bottom line is...
So what would you suggest?
Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we are tailoring solutions to the problem. And quite honestly, yes, we do have a great educational component at Hillcrest, but the reality is that there is a direct correlation between those that are in jail and those that drop out of school and do not get their GEDs. We have an extremely high dropout rate here in our public school system. Therefore, the court must work collaboratively with the public school system to find out what can we do better to make sure these children are not only getting their high school diplomas, but they're getting a GED. And if they're not getting a GED, then what vocational training are they getting? The idea is that we must successfully cause them to re-enter. If they do come in contact with the juvenile system, we must successfully cause them to re-enter not only back into the school, but into the workplace. Because again, a lot of young people, once they come in contact with the system, if an official juvenile court record is created, they have the same obstacles and barriers to success later on as adults. That means they're going to have a difficult time getting a job. So if there are ways that we can resolve issues apart from creating those records of criminality, then we have a responsibility as a judicial system to figure it out.
There's a couple of questions that I've heard Tracie bring up. One is work differently with the public schools or with schools in general.
Absolutely.
And secondly, on this question of juvenile records and how that follows a person throughout the rest of their life. John, what would you want to say about either of those?
Well, I think we do work collaboratively with the schools. I think that one of the things that we need to do is to take care of truancy issues, and so that needs to be very closely monitored. But I think that right now in Hamilton County, we're all under tremendous budget strain. The Hamilton County Juvenile Court has been cut dramatically. There's a $2.6 million cut coming next year. So what I think is necessary.
And where will that come from? What kind of services won't, have been either been cut out or might be cut out? I mean, what are we talking about?
When we talk about this incarcerative motive or this issue of everybody's going to jail, that's simply not true. The Hillcrest School has had literally at least half of its beds reduced. The 2020 Auburn Avenue Stay Center has had, I think it's down to about 80 beds. It used to have about 186.
You're saying that another cut's coming?
Absolutely.
On top of
well, I don't know that because I'm not sitting
Right.
in that court now, and I certainly don't want to be presumptuous. But what I'm saying is that when we talk about incarcerative courts, this is simply not happening in Hamilton County. It's just like the Justice Center, the same problems. The Justice Centers has wings closed, so has our system in Hamilton County. What I think is that we need to work better, more cost effectively, more efficiently in the court. I think we need to get private service providers engaged, perhaps earlier. I sit on the board of the Talbert House. Talbert has magnificent programs for all kinds of youthful offenders, drug treatment, mental illness, all that. I think it's imperative that we get in early. Perhaps when somebody first comes into the court, we have those range of services there, obviously, in the court. When I was a prosecutor there, we would come in, we would have our cases, a room full of people. I think it might be a good idea to have some of these services in that room. A parent that has a child that's down there, let's say on a drinking problem, maybe the parent wants to say, hey, it's just the first time Johnny's been here. But maybe if we start then, and the parents have some knowledge of it, we can stop that further behavior.
What about that? I mean, facing budget cuts.
Absolutely.
What are you going to be able to do?
And let me say again, the statistics that I'm citing are not statistics that I'm making up. The American Bar Association did a study on Hamilton County a number of years ago, and many of the statistics that you've heard me quote today have come from part of these studies, as well as the Ohio Justice and Policy Center has done a great deal of work investigating some of the discrepancies. And let me also say that this is very important to note, that over 70% of the children that are incarcerated are African American, and African American children only make up about 23-24% of Hamilton County. So there are some disparities and disproportionate representations within the system that we also need to address. But overall, you do specifically tailor whatever the solution is to the problem. And even with the budget cuts, there are ways to collaboratively partnership with organizations outside of the juvenile court system. You have the Urban League that focuses on youth, jobs, and justice. You have the Job Corps. I used to sit on the board of Job Corps, and they help persons to make sure that they get an education that they need to be productive citizens. You have a lot of children that are suffering today with mental illness. We need to make sure that if a child has committed a crime because they're mentally ill, that they get the mental ill treatment. If they're dealing with a substance abuse problem, we need to make sure that we're treating them for substance abuse, not criminality. If they're coming from an abused and neglected family, we need to deal with the familial issues that are there.
About out.
Yes.
But raising the possibility of working collaboratively with these other, whether it's Talbert House, Pro Kids, all of these different organizations that are out there, Urban League. Yes, the county is cutting, but those at the same time in this economic environment, those organizations are facing incredible budget strains as well and cuts. So aren't we in a situation where we're facing even a more difficult situation than talking about new programs sort of doesn't work.
That's why we need to rehabilitate, because it costs $9,000 a year to educate a child, $25,000 a year to incarcerate. Invest in rehabilitation on the front end, save the county money on the long end.
Any last word, John?
Well, I think that there's two components to juvenile court. We have to protect our community. We have to rehabilitate these young people that we can. And I think that we definitely need to be involved early. We need to pull our resources. We need to work with all these service providers to do the best job possible. I've had 10 years as a prosecutor, and I'm prepared to do this. I'm a magistrate as well for 10 years as well.
Thank you to both of you for being here this morning. Thank you for putting yourself out there in this race. And we'll see where this comes out on November the 2nd.
Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay tuned. After the break, we shift focus to an issue on the Campbell County ballot to reorganize county government. Welcome back. Residents of Campbell County this fall will vote on a proposal to reorganize the form of county government. What is publicly dubbed the Vote Yes on Justice of the Peace campaign proposes switching from the current commissioner system to a magistrate system. Currently, the county is divided into 3 districts for the purposes of the fiscal court. Candidates must live in the district that they represent, but they run and are elected at large, in other words, countywide. In other words, the candidate must appeal for votes throughout the county. The proposal is to carve the county into 8 districts by population with about 11,000 people per district. This is a sample map, by the way, not necessarily a final map. The magistrates will then not only live in their districts, but will be elected specifically from their districts to the fiscal court. I am joined this morning by Lloyd Rogers, a proponent of the new system. Mr. Rogers is currently a member of the Alexandria City Council. Between 1981 and 85, he served as a single-term Campbell County Judge Executive. Steve Pendery is the current Campbell County Judge Executive, having been first elected in 1998. Prior to that, he served on the City Council and as mayor of Fort Thomas. Both of you, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thanks for having us.
Lloyd, what's motivating this? Why do you think a change is necessary?
Well, there's a new paradigm in the country, a shift back to closer to the people, the government, and you've seen it in a lot of elections. I'm a member of the Tea Party. I'm a member of the committee set up to restore good government, and also I'm a member of the League of Property Owners. And we thought that that the system in Campbell County right now has the 4 elected members of the fiscal court. One is a lawyer that lives in Wilder, north of 275. Another one is a banker that lives in Newport. Another one is a lawyer and an insurance man that lives in Fort Thomas, and another businessman that lives in Fort Thomas. But we have all 4 of these representatives living in the north part of the county, which is about 1/10 of the area. And as I will show you on this map right here, this is Campbell County. This little horn up here at the top is where they all live. 9/10 of this county no one lives in, because they have gerrymandered it so it comes up here and hooks to someone that lives in Wilder to represent rural. And I believe that a couple farmers on the fiscal court would give a good representation of the rural part of the county. And that's the reason I'm doing this.
Steve, what do you say about that in terms of the current system not being representative of all the people of Campbell County?
Well, let me ask you this. As a citizen, would you rather have a vote in each of the 3 commissioners' races versus a system where you can only vote for 1 of 8? And let me take this a little further. If you're worried about representation, and let's say you're a South End person, a person that lives in the rural area of the county, which would likely only have 1 representative in this system of 8, you're setting up a system where that's going to pit rural interests against urban interests to a certain extent, and setting it up in such a way that you are invariably going to lose. 6 or 7 of the 8 are going to be either in an urbanized area or dominated by urban interests. And the way this thing sets up, a commissioner form of government, there are 3 separate districts, but they're required or encouraged to look after the good of the community as a whole because they run countywide. If you're looking after the interests only of a particular district, and there are 8 of you, and 6 or 7 of them are from urban areas, how often do you think that the rural interests are going to win in an era like this of scarce resources where everybody's scrapping around for money?
Lloyd, what do you say to that? This actually diminishes
Well,
the
let's look at a
influence.
parallel to this. Let's say that our representatives in the U.S. Congress all lived in Louisville and had to run statewide. Would people like that? Because they're all in Louisville, the biggest area? No. Somebody wants somebody that lives in their area that they can go contact right then. Right now, the commissioners are aloof. You ask someone in the southern part of the county who their representative is, and it's Mark Hayden, and the only time they have a chance to see him is once a month at an hour-and-a-half fiscal court meeting in Alexandria. Otherwise, they got to go north to find out whoever the representative
Let
is.
me raise this question. As someone who lives not in Campbell County, I live in Ohio. you know, one of the things about Kentucky counties they're relatively small. I mean, compared to Ohio counties, they're relatively small, both in geographical size and in terms of population. Is it really that important? I mean, is the Campbell County so huge that people can't have those kinds of interactions with somebody who happens to live in another part of the county?
Well, on Wagner Road, I was out there recently, and they don't have any water. They said, I wish we had a representative so we get some water. And I said, well, really getting water gets down to how many people you have on the road and how expensive it would be. But I said, they said, well, who is my representative? I said, you're down here and you don't know who your representative is? They said, no, we don't. But if they had somebody that lived in that area and they could go right to who it is, it's just like in Congress. If I need something, I go to Jeff Davis. I don't go down to Louisville to see somebody. I go to Jeff Davis.
What would your answer be if someone asked you who their representative was and they lived on Wagner Road?
Me and the other three commissioners. The races in Campbell County are so close historically that even in a landslide, it's such a small percentage and small number that you can't afford to ignore any voting group, minority, though it may be. And you know, the whole idea that suddenly we're all excited about the way Congress works at this moment, and a Tea Partier beside might say that, is astonishing to me. You go from 100% representation, in which you have a vote for the judge executive and 3 commissioners, to 13%. You're voting for one of the 8 commissioners.
By the way, when we say that these districts would have about 11,000 people,
right?
Is that the total population, or is that voters? 11,000 total?
That's the total population.
So number of voters is going to be, what, 6,000?
Right. But
so, you know, those are pretty small.
But you got 120 counties in Kentucky, and 104 of them have this type government. And Hardin County tried commissioner type for 4 years, and 4 years ago they put this on the ballot. Now they are going back to the Justice of Peace.
Well, can I ask another question? What would be the potential cost of all of a sudden you go from 3 commissioners to 8 magistrates? Now, what do you say? What do you think that would be?
I think that if you represent 29,000 people as a commissioner right now, and you would represent 11,000 people, that salary should be commensurate with the number of people that you represent. So right now, if a commissioner makes 37,000 for 29, you cut that down because he only represents 11,000. And
so your argument, I know
my argument
on your
is, yeah, it's a number of
website,
people.
it would be neutral.
It would be neutral. And I've had people say to me, well, wait a minute, we are not like some of these other counties. Well, Kentucky is not like California, Illinois, or New York, but we have representatives the same as them states.
Okay. Steve, what do you say about the cost of...
8's going to cost more than 3. It does around the state. He's talking about Hardin County. They are going back to the magistrate form. That had to do with a political thing. They're a contest between a couple of judge executive candidates, and they're going to spend $200,000 more on the magistrate form when they do than they did on the commissioner's side. Commissioners and magistrates around the state make the same kind of money.
Is that set by the state?
No, it's not. It's set by the commissioners.
Set by the commissioners, okay.
By the same principle, the salaries in Congress is set by the representatives too, but it doesn't become effective until after the next election. Therefore, if you don't like what they set, you can put them out of office.
So let me ask one other question here, and that is the way this is being, and I know some people who live in Campbell County, and when I was telling them I was going to do this, they said, well, oh, that's those signs about vote yes for justice of the peace. So we're talking about commissioners and magistrates and structure, but justice of the peace is what's out there on the signs, which I have to say looks a little confusing to me.
Well, it's the old Constitution. The old state constitution calls them justice of the peace, and we went by what the KRS says we must list it, and we had to list it that way.
Yeah, it's a late 1800s concept, in other words. Okay. Justice of the peace and magistrate versus commissioner, which is the more modern form that we've had since 1918.
Okay, this is, thank you for being here. This is one of those organizational issues that people need to plunge in and find out about and talk. If you're interested in reading some information from a particular perspective, the supporters of this measure, you can go to www.cc JOP.com. Now remember, that's one perspective on this, but you could also call up your current commissioners or the judge executive, and there will be other perspectives out there.
Yes.
So this is an important reorganization issue. Thank you for being here this morning. We're going to watch this one on election night, see how this turns out. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Next week, the race for the Ohio House seat that features the president of the local Tea Party. Have a good week.